Two different cars now taking two very different routes to the same destination, and that destination is to be a car that's pretty much everything to everybody. It's got to be supercar fast, it's got to have room on board for 4 adults, and I do mean room, not all screwed up in the back, and their luggage, and it's got to look good. In other words, it's got to be a super saloon, and this, the BMW M5, is the benchmark super saloon, even an ultra saloon. It is big, it is handsome, it's built by BMW so it shouldn't break, and under here there is a colossally powerful 4-litre V8 engine. It pushes out 400 brake horsepower, and it boasts more valves per cylinder and camshafts than you could shake a laptop computer at. And so, by way of complete contrast, still trying to do the same thing, from Australia, this, the Holden HRV GTS-R. It's a big, flamboyant car. If you think it looks a bit like a Vauxhall Omega, that's because, well, it is a bit like a Vauxhall Omega. Quite a lot of it is based on that car, but somehow they've squeezed up front a 5.7-litre V8 engine, usually to be found at the pointy end of a Corvette. Here it's mated to a 6-speed gearbox, but that's as sophisticated as it gets, because this is all about brute force. For instance, just 2 valves per cylinder, nothing like the M5. So, before we get to grips with this, let's check out the benchmark. Oh goody, we're driving big fast cars. From the moment you fire it up, you're aware of that V8. It's not exactly raucous, it's a very refined and sophisticated version of the usual V8 burble, and it is deeply sinister, a reminder of what you're driving. Not that you need many reminders of what you're driving, it is colossally powerful, but it's the way it delivers that power that is so engaging. At lower revs and when you're just cruising and being gentle, it is creamy smooth. Start to press on, and boy, every single movement of your right foot has an immediate effect in terms of bringing the horizon closer. It's simply a machine that is designed to get from one place to another very, very quickly. And if as you're cruising along it's not going quick enough, then there is the sport mode. I press a button, thus. And I'm not rewarded with just a few subtle little changes. Oh no, it's the equivalent of pressing the button on the Batmobile that puts the wings out and the missile shields over the windows. It's unbelievable. It lowers the car and its suspension. It remaps the engine for sports performance. It even weights up the steering so it feels more like a supercar to drive. It's an astounding piece of kit. Now, it might be vulgar to talk about figures in such refined company, but blimey, have a look at these. 0 to 60 in the M5 comes up in 4.7 seconds, and it goes steaming on to 100 miles an hour in 10.6. All of which would be brilliant if it weren't for just one thing. It's as though BMW tantalizingly give you a glimpse of all this performance and then say, no, you cannot use it. Because the traction control is ridiculous. It's nearly as powerful as the engine. And I don't mean that it's just a bit of a pain, you can't go as quick as you want to go. What I mean is, if you're pulling out from a junction in a bit of a hurry, and perhaps there's a lorry coming the other way, if the BMW M5 decides, nope, you're using too much power, chum, that's it. It cuts the lot. It leaves you dead in the water. It's a nanny state. This sounds much more like the kind of V8 we might be used to. It is an enormous noise, and you can't help but blipping with the right foot at every available opportunity. But despite the noise and the extra capacity, 5.7 litres over the M5's 4 litres, it ain't as quick. No sirree. Not by a massive amount. 0 to 60 is in what? 4.9 seconds. 0 to 100 dash is in 12 and a bit seconds, so it's only a second or two here and there. But on paper it makes a difference. As a drive, you do notice that it just doesn't feel as quick. Mind you, whereas the M5 almost hides its power, and particularly with that rather overbearing traction control takes it away from you, the Holden glories in it. The traction control, what there is located behind this little flap where incredibly you can turn it up or down depending upon just how leery you feel. Occasionally its rather less than salubrious roots do shine through, such as the interior. I think it's Le Boudoir de Tarte is the style adopted, rather nasty bits of plastic that don't always fit together particularly well. The steering though is great, it feels just weighted up enough, and the driving position not too bad. because I've said it is a little bit raucous and a bit grunty, and it takes a more low-tech approach than the BMW, might lead you to think, well, it's a bit of a brute to drive. But it's not. In actual fact, the whole thing adds up to a surprisingly sophisticated car. It feels very well screwed down. There's huge amounts of grip. Both of these cars will set you back around £50,000 on the road, but start to add on the bells and whistles, and particularly in the case of the BMW, you can expect to pay the thick end of £60,000. So, both of our cars arrive at their supercar destination by their different routes. Ultimately though, if you and 3 other people need to get from one place to another by road as quickly as possible, it's the M5 that's always going to be your fastest mode of transport. The Holden though is at least a little bit more flamboyant. There's more of a sensation of speed, and that for me is what it's about. After all, to use either of these vehicles to the limit of their capabilities means you'll be breaking a lot of laws several times over. And that brings me to the final point, which is if it's illegal to use the things anyway, and if I was spending the best part of £65,000 on a car that boasted supercar performance, I'd want it to look like it could do 200 miles an hour even when it was parked. So why not leave the supercar performance to the supercars and the saloon car characteristics to the saloon cars?